I'm a first-time poster, so please bear with me. Sorry it's so wordy. This incident occurred about 6 years ago when I was 21 years old. Male. Since I was a young kid, a great interest of mine has been herpetology, the study of reptiles and amphibians, and going out searching for these types of critters, or herping, is my favorite hobby. South Louisiana, where I live, is a great place for herping and a really good place to find my favorite animals and snakes. On the day of the incident, I was preparing to search for snakes on a road that ran through a swamp near Lake Pontchartrain by slowly driving the road and catching snakes that were crossing it. It was late afternoon, and I had stopped at a gas station to fill my truck up before heading out to the herping spot. This particular gas station had a reputation for violent robberies and other unsavory activities, but they also had the cheapest gas prices in town, and it was still light out, so I wasn't too worried. I was pumping gas and daydreaming when an old late model sedan that looked like it had seen better days pulled up beside me. In the car were 4 thuggish young men staring at me. The driver was a very big individual in his late 20s or early 30s, regarded me out of the open window. I instantly got nervous, as I had no idea what they wanted. After a few seconds, the driver said, "Hey, little boy, I got that morphine." I realized they were trying to sell me drugs. I replied, "Nah, man, I'm good." The driver said again, "Come on, I got that morphine." And again, I told him no. The driver tried several more times to push his dope, each time calling me some variant of little boy. I am a very small young man with a slight build, and even to this day I could pass as a teenager, and while I am fine with this, I don't like constantly being reminded of it, and I certainly don't like somebody using my tall stature to intimidate me into doing something I don't want to do. I finally got fed up and yelled at the driver, "No, I don't want any frickin' morphine, dude. Go the heck away and leave me alone." This drew the attention of several other customers, which caused the guy to leave quickly, squealing his tires as he did. I paid for my gas and headed out on the road through the swamp. The road gets little traffic as there is a major interstate next to it. Mostly the traffic consists of people fishing or launching boats, so it's great for herping. I stopped my truck at a place where I wanted to begin my search and began going through several pillowcases that held the snakes I had found on a previous trip that I needed to let go. Inside each pillowcase, most of which contained small harmless water snakes, was a scrap of paper that had the mile along the stretch of road they were found on, so I knew where to release them. I was making a list for efficiency's sake so that I could quickly release one and get on with my search. I was checking a case which held the greater than 4 feet long rat snake when the same late model sedan pulled up to a stop behind my truck. All 4 of the occupants piled out and began walking toward me. The driver, who must have weighed over a solid 260, was coming straight at me while the others were fanning out around me. The driver started yelling, "What's up, boy? You don't want my stuff? We're going to see what your little punk ass does now." I was scared to death and had to work very hard to keep my knees from buckling. I thought about the tire iron in my truck and realized that I would not be able to dig it out before they got to me, and that fear had drained the strength from me, so that I would not be able to use it effectively. Anyway, so I did the only thing I could think to do. I reached into the pillowcase and pulled out the snake. The snake instantly drew itself into a coil and began to gape and hiss. The 4 thugs, now only a feet away, realized that was in my hand and immediately stopped their advance. When the driver began to back up, the movement caught the snake's attention and it lunged out in his direction. At this, the 4 of them began screaming and cursing loudly and piled hastily back into their car. They took off so quickly that they hit the median and nearly tore out the bottom of the old car. I stood there shaking, unable to move for a few minutes. The intimidating but harmless rat snake began to squirm around and lash onto my hand so that I had to come out of my fear-induced coma. I quickly drove to the release points of all the snakes and I had let them go, thanking the rat snake as it slithered into vegetation, and went immediately home without doing any more herping. I'm 28 male and have 3 younger brothers who I feel very protective of, even into adulthood because of this. Let's get into it. We were all in elementary school and we would often play by the park behind our house or in the front yard with a neighbor family. They couldn't play with us that day, so we were by ourselves in the front yard. It must have been late afternoon or dusk. We were messing around in front of the porch when suddenly a beat-up old light-colored pickup truck out of nowhere rolls up in front of our house and parks on the sidewalk in front of our lawn. We were kind of shocked because this truck appeared so suddenly, so we stopped playing and watched what's going to happen. A man dressed like a lumberjack, wearing some flannel or checkered shirt, gets out and walks onto our lawn, making a beeline straight for my brothers and me. He slows his pace and is smiling as he approaches us but doesn't stop and asks, "Are your mom and dad home?" With a sinister smile ear to ear. This is when everything became slow motion. I looked at my brothers who had all gathered behind me out of fear. I said to them, "Everyone get inside." And they ran to the front door as fast as they could. The man asked again if my parents were home. As I too am going towards the front door, "Yes, they are," I shout as I back into the house and start to close it, locking every lock as he tells me through the screen door that they are selling meat from the truck and they want us to come look. I get a glimpse of a rusty meat locker with a padlock on it in the bed of the truck and a woman in the passenger seat staring at this whole situation before I close the main front door and get the deadbolt locked. The man moves away from the door itself and starts peering through our bay window. One of my younger brothers yells, "Dad, there's someone here." Our dad was at work still though. We all run upstairs to where our mom is peeing in the master bathroom. LOL, and has no idea what's going on. We tell her everything and she jumps off the toilet frantically and makes herself decent, all while panicking and saying, "Where are my babies?" She goes downstairs and pulls the front door open, asking, "What the hell are you doing? Get away from my children." He repeats the line about selling meat and our mom less than politely declines and slams the door in his face and calls our dad. He gets in the truck as fast as he got out and peels out as he tries to get out of the neighborhood. They did not go to any other houses trying to sell their wares. They only spoke to our family and, indeed, to us minors. Our mom says she thinks he was planning to make us look in the meat locker, push us in, and take us away. I don't know what would have happened if that were true. One of my younger brothers was troubled with nightmares of being kidnapped up until his teenage years because of this unhappy experience. Weird child meat salesman. That's not meat. This just happened yesterday. For some background, I work at a local bakery that specializes in fresh baked pastries and breads. We were insanely busy, especially now that we're getting closer to fall and the holidays. We have a lot of older people come in, and I've definitely had some strange interactions with the older men, but nothing like this. I was only a few hours into my shift. We had been slammed all morning, and unfortunately, I was on the front counter. I was getting pretty exhausted with interacting with customers, but my lunch was just around the corner, so I wasn't too stressed. An older man comes in with who I assume was his mother. Right off the bat, my stomach drops when I see him, but seeing as I was the only one available at the time, I shook it off and greeted him. He sort of just stared at me, and then began sounding off his questions. "What's your darkest bread? Do you have sour rye? What's Camplin Gullo?" The questions weren't strange, but every time I would answer him, he would just give me that damn stare and look me up and down. He decided on a few loaves and seemed offended when I asked if he wanted them sliced, so I just rolled my eyes and bagged them up. Whatever. Just get out of my restaurant already, right? At the time, a coworker was actually in line behind him, waiting to get food on his day off. Our barista guy walked over to talk to him as if nothing else was going on, so I immediately felt more comfortable. "Wrong. You're a really pretty girl," he said, staring down at me. Great, here it comes. Now I have to awkwardly finish ringing him up and hope he doesn't hold me hostage at the register. Both of my coworkers are now eyeing this guy, ready to step in if he tries to flirt with me. Instead, he made a motion towards his ears while staring at mine. I have my ears stretched an inch. Then he made a finger gun at me, holding it up towards my ears. Whenever I see those, I want to stuff a barrel through them and empty a magazine. Mind if I try? We all three stood there in shock, staring at him. I felt the color drain from my face. The woman he came in with was laughing, covering her face. He gave an awkward chuckle and said, I might hit you if I do that. That might be bad." And then they left. I watched them get in their truck, and for a few minutes they sat there waving at me. I went to the back and told my manager, and she was furious. She went out to find him, but he was gone. My other two coworkers came into the back to check on me and made sure I was okay. And then they hung around up front to make sure he didn't come back. While I was on my lunch, they said they saw a truck that looked like his stopped in front of the store. It then sped off when one of them started going out front, so while they weren't sure, it was pretty suspicious. I'm off for the weekend, but creepy annoying old dude, keep yourself and your weird fetish for shooting through bodily orifices away from me. Thanks. I lived in a handful of different apartment communities with my mom for the majority of my teenage years, some better than others. Incidentally, this occurred in the best of all of them. I was 16 at the time. There was a group of girls around 10 years old that liked to hang around and play volleyball together a lot. They hated me because I used to get with another kid and throw water balloons at them while they were playing. In hindsight, this is pretty creepy in itself, but at the time it was hilarious. Well, I'd probably be the last person they would ever have visited. One day, when I was playing GTA in the middle of a summer day, they came and knocked on my door. I was going to make a smart-arse comment, but they looked pretty distressed, so I asked them what was wrong. They told me there was a weird guy driving around near where they were hanging out a few times and wanted me to come by. I was the oldest kid in the complex, so it makes sense they would come to me for this. We went and got my buddy, who was 14 at the time, and went over there. Well, they were right. We got over there and there was this guy in an old truck, still there watching us approach. I was pretty fearless, so I flipped him off and started throwing a football with my friend for a while. The girls went back to playing volleyball. This is where it gets absolutely crazy. After about 10 minutes, the guy gets out and starts walking towards all of us. We decide to get the heck out of there, so we walk back towards my place. He follows. I tell everybody to book it, so we start running. He starts running behind us. At this point, I decide I'm going to get my mom's gun and scare this guy away, so we beat him back to my apartment and lock the door. I get the gun, unloaded, total idiocy, and go back outside to find he's still waiting with a nasty look on his face. I look him dead in the eye and tell him to get the F out of here and point the gun at him. He smiles, reaches into his belt, and raises his own gun right back at me. It's at this point that I completely crap myself for the first time in the encounter. I know I can't fly. I went completely numb standing there, gun raised, for what felt like years. It was probably about 15 seconds. Neither of us said a word. After that eternity, he finally lowered his gun and walked away. We called the cops after this, but admitted the part about my gun, but they never found the guy. I have not pulled a gun on anyone else since then, thankfully. I was the neighborhood badass forever after that, but I absolutely did not want that designation. I didn't sleep for weeks. I can still clearly see the barrel of that dude's gun staring me down. I felt like the smallest dude in the world for those 15 or so seconds. This was the time when I was most scared of my whole life, and it changed everything for me. Let me start by saying this is something I had to go through, and there are still some things about it I don't really understand. I don't talk about this to anyone in my personal life, really. Not because of how painful it is, but because I don't like people's reactions to it. No matter how well-intentioned the other person is, it tends to alter relationships. And though over the past 21 years, I've learned a lot about what really happened, I'll tell it from my 7-year-old perspective because that's the way I remember it. I lived with my mom. My parents had been divorced for 3 years, which, for a 7-year-old, is forever. My mom back then was somebody who took extra care of me. She didn't like it when I played in the yard, and she didn't like it when I spent a lot of time at our neighbor's house. She always dropped me off at school and was waiting for me at the end of the day to take me home. She taught me how to lock all 3 locks on our door and how to see what different cars were parked outside, and, of course, stranger danger. She was, I now understand, paranoid. There's lots more, but I'll just skip ahead. One night, we were sitting on the couch watching TV. A small pickup truck pulled into our driveway. This was really strange because we weren't expecting anyone. But what was even worse was my mom's reaction. I'd never seen her move so fast. She leapt up from the couch to make sure the door was locked. Then she ran to me and picked me up hard and carried me to her bedroom in the back and had me hide under the bed. She ran out of the room and closed the door behind her. A man was pounding on the front door and she started yelling and screaming at him. Then all of a sudden there was this giant crash. A moment later the bedroom door flew open and my mom ran inside. There was a big man behind her. I could see the cuffs on his jeans and the toes of his black and brown shoes. My mom was screaming. She tried to turn around and slam the bedroom door shut, but suddenly it pushed open and she was thrown onto the bed above me. The heels of her bare feet were by my head, hovering a few inches off the floor, and the man's shoes were in the doorway. There was complete silence for a moment before my mom started to quaver audibly. I heard 2 really loud pops. Nothing moved. Then the man's feet ran away. I heard his truck start and pull out the driveway. I waited for my mom to come get me. Her feet slid down to touch the floor. Then the rest of her came down too. Her hair was all messy, like what happens when you've been sitting up reading with your head against a pillow and it gets frizzy. She had her back to me, curled up with her knees against her chest, and her nightshirt was up in her armpits. I put my hand on her back and was about to ask if she was okay, when I saw the pool of liquid coming towards me from under her body. I flew away from her, out from under her bed on the other side of the room. I think I was probably yelling for her or at her or something. It seemed like just a few seconds passed, pressed as hard against the wall as I could with my face buried in the baseboard, before I began to hear sirens. It was a big city, so I was used to the noise, but it got louder and louder until I clamped my hands over my ears. More feet ran through the front door in my house. I thought the man had come back. They were heavy-footed, and I heard people yelling, "Police!" And I thought that's what I needed. I needed police. The rest of the night was feet stomping in blankets, and I whisked past my mom so that I couldn't see her. I remember really wanting to tell them to help her, but I couldn't get the words out. It took a long time for me to forgive myself for that. Of course they were going to help her. They put her into an ambulance while I stood on the front lawn. I went into a police car behind it, and I never really saw her again. They say she died in the ambulance. I saw her at the funeral, but it wasn't really her. So the questions answered later don't really help all that much, but here they are. My dad cheated on my mom, and so my mom cheated on my dad. The guy she was with decided to leave his own wife for my mom. My dad left because everything was so messed up. My mom felt really guilty and broke it off with the guy. I'm not saying his name. He was very upset at how she ruined his life, and she had been worried about him for years. He found her through a mutual friend, and that was that. The man went back to his apartment after, and seemingly disappeared. There was a lot of time with the police. I talked to a lady in a room in front of a camera, and my dad came back and took me to his house to live. It was extremely confusing. I realized that there were two English languages, one that kids spoke and one that adults spoke, and only adults were fluent in both. They would have conversations in that foreign tongue above my head, then switch to my language and say, "Okay, now just tell us what you saw, and you're going to live with me now." Stuff like that. So that's my scary story. My dad wasn't really all that into kids. I kind of just pulled inside myself and worked on school. I went to college and have a good job and friends and all of that, but I have learned to not speak of this. The internet is great for anonymously talking about things, but I'm not sure if this helps anyone. It's just scary and sad. I've spent most of my life only talking about this to therapists, and despite what you see on TV, that's been really helpful. And also, despite what you see on TV, I didn't block it out or lose all the details or whatever. I remember every moment of that night, every breath and footstep, every loud noise and every whimper, and I always will. Thanks for listening. My apartment complex is in a safe neighborhood with well-manicured grounds and awesome amenities. My family and I had lived comfortably in our second-floor apartment for about 2 years before Shrek moved into the unit above us. We exchanged friendly hellos and awkward smiles in the stairwell, but beyond that, we never formally introduced ourselves and never knew his real name. Because he was large, wore messy hair, and had a certain goofiness about him, we secretly nicknamed him Shrek. 6 months after he moved in, we heard shouting and banging in Shrek's apartment. The fight wasn't extreme enough to call the police, but somebody had clearly upset Shrek because he was shouting profanities and slamming things loudly enough to catch our attention. We never heard the shouts of a second voice. We only heard his screams. The fights dissipated rather abruptly, and we never gave them a second thought. As winter turned into spring, I found myself spending more time out on my balcony. One evening, I was sitting outside having a phone conversation. Amidst the chit-chat and giggles, I got this odd feeling that I was being watched. I looked around and realized that Shrek was standing very close to our building at ground level, which put his head just below my balcony. Our eyes met, and I offered a half smile and hello. I didn't feel scared, but the exchange felt weird. He asked if he could have a cigarette. I said sure and passed one down. After he walked away, I lowered my voice and laughingly told my friend that Shrek had startled me. In the days and weeks that followed, I found Shrek lurking under my balcony more often. One evening at twilight, I was sitting at the patio table talking with my friend when I got a feeling I was being watched. I looked around and didn't see anything, so I went about my conversation. I couldn't shake the feeling, and then suddenly my gaze caught something in the shadows that I had previously missed. Shrek was standing in a darkened corner under my balcony, just staring at me. That was the first time he genuinely creeped me out. He didn't speak a word. He just stood and stared. The exchanges between Shrek and me began to happen more often. I'd catch him staring at me. He'd ask for a cigarette or he'd ask if I needed some company. I tried to be friendly and cordial, but to be honest, he annoyed me more than he scared me. He seemed like a big lug who lacked basic social skills. Over summer, the fights between him and his mysterious visitor also became more frequent. We'd often hear him shouting and banging, but we never saw anyone, and the fights didn't seem overly violent. One day in October, I passed Shrek in the stairwell. The whole right side of his face was a mess, black eye and swollen cheek, and dark purple bruising. I wondered what happened to him, but I didn't dare to stop to make small talk. I figured he had another one of his fights with his girl or boyfriend. Felt bad for him. By the November, the weather was getting chilly, and I had completely quit smoking by then. So I was spending less time out on my balcony. This meant that I didn't see Shrek as often as I did before. One evening early in December, I was lying on my bed watching TV when I heard Shrek's voice screaming so loud that I thought he was standing in my living room. I heard booming thuds and loud FUs just outside my front door and in the stairwell. It sounded like a pretty serious fight. I remembered Shrek's face several weeks earlier and was concerned for his safety. I called 911 and asked that somebody do a wellness check for my neighbor. I explained that I was safe, but I wanted to make sure that he was also safe. I told the dispatcher that I didn't hear his second voice, but Shrek was clearly shouting at someone. Nothing came of it, and by the new year, we had forgotten the whole thing. Early, about 4:50, one March morning, my family and I were awoken to a very loud boom. It felt like a truck hit our building. The walls, the bed, and the floor shook. Within a few seconds came more booms. After fully awakening, I realized that the sounds are coming from Shrek's apartment. Our 3 children, 18, 16, and 14, are now awake and trying to make sense of what is going on. More banging and what sounds like a terrible struggle are going on above our heads. We could hear Shrek shouting, "F you and shut up." I truly thought that somebody just above us was in a struggle for their life. My husband called the police and dispatched as they will have somebody over immediately. We waited. The noises intensify. We hear Shrek's screams and loud bangs and thuds as though a body were being slammed against walls and furniture. Then the shower turns on and very loud, bass and death metal begins to blast. An eternity seems to pass, but in reality maybe only 10 minutes. The police have still not arrived. Keep looking out the window for signs of them, but all we can see are 2 police vehicles positioned on opposite ends of the parking lot. Our family is terrified. Only one door stands between us and whatever chaos is going on right above us. In that moment, I texted my friend and told her that I thought Shrek was murdering someone or being murdered himself because I truly thought we were hearing a murder. The booms get very loud, and while I knew there was no actual explosion, the level of sound almost compared to that of a small explosion. I call the police again and the operator says help is coming. Again, we just kept waiting. A few minutes later, we heard loud footsteps storm our building. We hear the police officer introducing themselves and banging on the door at Shrek's house. We hear a gunshot. My husband and I haul our kids into our bedroom and at the back of the apartment. We have them huddle low onto our bed and lock our bedroom door. I get a call from 911 operator. She tells me to remain indoors under all circumstances and away from the front door. We hear voices, banging, and lots of commotion just above us. Then it gets quiet. My husband calls me to the window where I see the officers taking Shrek away in cuffs. By now, the entire parking lot is lit up with flashing red and blue lights from emergency vehicles and news vans. A few moments later, 2 police officers knock on our door. They interview each of us extensively and speak to each of our children one at a time. About half an hour later, 3 plainclothes detectives return and take turns collecting a statement from each of us. It is now 9 a.m. and the sun is out. We can see crime scene tape around our building. Police, detectives, and news vans remain outside. We are exhausted. In the days that followed, we finally learned Shrek's real name. We learned that he answered the door clutching a samurai sword, which is what prompted the officer to fire a shot. Thankfully, he wasn't hit and nobody else was in the apartment. Shrek also admitted to police that he was using noise as a tactic to get us to go upstairs. His intention was to provoke us enough to force a confrontation, and he wanted to cut us with his sword. His account of the night was cloudy and confused. He said he instigated this confrontation at midnight. The reality is, at midnight, all was calm and quiet. The ordeal didn't begin until almost 5 o'clock. Police reports also indicated that during interrogation, Shrek appeared to carry conversations and argue with persons not present. Reading those words in the newspaper triggered something in my mind. All of those times we heard him fighting and screaming at somebody, he was completely alone. The realization as to the depth of Shrek's mental illness and or anger issues was chilling. He was jailed and evicted from our complex. Life has since returned to normal in our quiet little neighborhood. We have heard no other reports as to whether he is free or behind bars. Wherever he is, I certainly hope he is getting the help that he needs. So, Don Fairy Tale Shrek, let's not meet again. I live in a major city and currently don't do a lot of driving due to ongoing issues with my car, plus the pandemic has made me turn to more delivery apps in general. So the other day around 1 p.m., I decided to order some lunch after doing a lot of cleaning. I placed the Uber Eats order and found something to watch while I waited for the food. Within a few minutes, a driver accepted the order and I noticed right away that the driver, Anthony, was on a bike and didn't have a profile picture or any deliveries on record. At first, I wasn't alarmed. I was almost amused. Oh wow, guess I'm this person's first ever customer. But then a full 30 minutes passes with no driver movement on the app. And at this point, I think maybe something is glitching out or the driver is stuck. I contact support via the chat option and they ended up assigning a new driver because they couldn't reach the first one. Odd, but whatever. Now this is when it gets a little bit weirder. The new driver assigned is in the exact same spot as the original driver was. They are also on a bike and also have no profile picture and have no prior deliveries as well. And this driver's name is Lori. I let another 20 minutes pass with no driver movement before I message them myself and say, "Hi there, are there any issues with the order?" The app that shows the driver saw the message but gave no response. All this time I'm checking to see if Uber Eats is maybe experiencing issues. None that I could find, and at this point, while I'm definitely weirded out, I'm mostly just hungry, so I contact support again to request some assistance. They reassign the driver again and apologize for the inconvenience. Same deal, they also tried to contact the driver with no response. Finally, the third driver assigned is the exact same scenario. Same spot, on a bike, no profile picture, no prior deliveries. Only this time the name is Robert, and before I can react and go about canceling the order at this point because I'm tired of dealing with this, he suddenly has my food and immediately messages me the following. "Hello, have your food. What's your number?" And I respond right away with, "I'm not super comfortable giving my phone number out when you can just message me here." And he responds with, "What's your number? Be there in 10. How old are you?" And at this point, the alarm bells are going off and I contact support immediately to have the order canceled and get further assistance. I get connected to Uber's safety team who inform me that the order has been canceled. I'll be refunded, and they started taking down the details of the strange interactions. As I'm giving the woman on the phone the info she needs, I'm starting to calm down, thinking this was just some creep or something, and that's when I hear a man's voice at the front door. "Miss, I have your food." And I can't even describe the chill that went down my spine because of the way he said it. Making things even worse, the Uber safety woman on the phone with me heard him as well and goes, "Is that him? We canceled the order." I poked my head around the door. The main heavy door was open. The metal screen door was closed and locked but allowed us to each see each other. To get a look at him, and when he saw me on the phone, he went from smiling to looking furious. He suddenly got right up against the door and kept asking who I was on the phone with. And at this point, I started asking him to please leave because he was making me really scared and getting more and more angry. And at this point, he started pounding on my door and grabbing the doorknob while shouting to be let in. The woman on the phone is asking if I'm okay, and the man is shouting. So basically, I'm in full meltdown mode at this point and hurriedly closed the heavy door to lock it. The man is becoming borderline belligerent as he kicks my door, and the woman tells me to call the police. He ended up walking away from our house about a minute after that and back up to the sidewalk, and for a moment, I thought he screwed off, so I finished my conversation with the Uber safety woman so she could submit the report. Once she submitted it, I called the police and told them what happened. They weren't incredibly helpful at first since he didn't actually break in or put his hands on me, and they told me if he came back to call again and they would send an officer out. I did end up having to call them again and give a full report, plus description of the man since he didn't end up leaving right away. He stayed in the neighborhood for almost 20 minutes. According to one of my neighbors, after she heard the yelling, she saw the man I described walk back up from my house to the sidewalk and hop into a truck with another man in the passenger seat. And they apparently just sat there staring at people walking by and being incredibly sketchy. And that's when she walked back towards my house and asked me what happened. Luckily, she was able to give me and the cop a description of the vehicle and the other man as well. So basically, this was a very bizarre and uncomfortable experience, and I wanted to share it to maybe see if anyone has ever experienced anything like this, because honestly I'm still pretty shaken up and I will be avoiding delivery apps for quite a while. So I'm at a club with my then best friend. Near the end of the night, we're approached by a random guy who is alone. He has a heavy accent and tells us he just moved here from Russia. Says his name is Jesse. Doesn't sound like a very Russian name, and I'm immediately on guard. This friend of mine has a tendency to pick the worst guys. I'm talking like in a room full of people, she will somehow manage to pick out the single craziest guy in there and start dating him. And being as close as we were, I always managed to get sucked into it. This night is no exception. I pull her away from Jesse, but not before he manages to get my friend's phone number. Later, as we are in her car ready to drive home, she gets a call from him. She answers, and his voice rings out of her car speaker. "Can you give me a ride home?" "No." I immediately mouth from my passenger side. She's silent. "I just live around the corner from the club." He persuades. She reluctantly agrees and hangs up. I ask her why he can't take an Uber or walk if it's that close. But it's my friend's car and she wants to be nice and give him a ride. So we pull back in front of the club and he hops in. During this short car ride, he manages to get out a sob story about how he moved here to start over with his 1-year-old son. His wife back in Russia died in childbirth. My friend is eating it up, and I hate him almost immediately. The next day he's texting and calling my friend asking her out. She at least has the sense to not go out with him alone, asking me to come along with the guy I was dating at the time. So we go to the beach and drink a few beers. Jesse takes his and wanders off alone. My guy joins him and I see them chatting for a while. I distinctly remember him describing Jesse later that night. I like the guy, he just seems a little lonely. I'm wondering why nobody can see the red flags but me. Then again, I always did have a sense for these things. The night goes relatively smoothly. As the weeks go by, the four of us hang out a couple more times. Jesse keeps trying to invite himself over to my friend's place. I beg my friend to, if nothing else, keep her address private. Do not let him know where you live. Thankfully, she thinks this is a smart policy. He seems oddly fixated on going specifically to her home. As the weeks go by, he shows us pictures of his son and he even shows us a picture of his son's birth certificate, which seems a bit overcompensating. But I had never met his supposed son, and have no idea where he was during all these outings Jesse was going on with us. I ask him plenty of personal questions trying to figure him out, and I think he knows I'm onto him. But soon enough, my friend starts dating someone else who is an entire other story in itself, and Jesse wants to be the only guy in her life. He becomes possessive and makes her choose, him or the other guy. Unfortunately for Jesse, she chooses the other guy. He is furious. The next day, Jesse is blowing up her phone. Texts, calls, voicemails. When we finally listen to them, they are increasingly violent, full of cursing. The last voicemail reveals everything. It was all a lie. There is no son or wife. He calls us idiots. The last words he speaks say that she'd regret it and he will make her explode. I shudder to think of it now, so she blocks him and life goes on. But due to the next boyfriend being even crazier than this one, I eventually need to take a break from this girl. We go our separate ways, and yet the nagging feeling about Jesse never goes away. Jesse often pops into my head and I get the worst eerie feeling. A while down the road, I end up catching up with her over text. Even after our falling out, she can hardly wait a few texts into reconnecting to ask if I remember Jesse. My blood instantly turns cold and I say yes. She sends me the link to a news article. It's about a Russian man arrested for a crime while trying to flee the country. He has a very Russian name I've never heard before. As I read the details of the crime, I'm horrified. It turns out he murdered his ex-girlfriend by shooting her 5 times. I look at the photo of the suspect. It's Jesse. He got life in prison after making a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. The earlier post about the maintenance man brought this other memory up for me and inspired my first share here. I commented there about some experiences I had in the late 1990s, and this one happened in 2005 in a small southern town. I was a single mom with 2 kids in middle school and had just moved to a smaller town to get the kids into a better school situation. Within all of the moving necessities was having the natural gas turned on for the heat. This required a gas man to come to the house to turn it on. I had to work the day that this was scheduled to happen. The gas man had been asked to call my cell phone when he was heading to my place so I could meet him there, and just like that, he had my phone number. It didn't seem like an issue at that point, but it did indeed become one. Gas man calls and we have some kind of phone banter for a minute or two, and off I go to meet him. I was only about 8 to 10 minutes away and got there just before he did. He pulls up behind my car and we get out about at the same time. Friendly greetings, and going into the house, everything feels normal. While the gas man was checking things and flipping switches, he was casually asking me lots of questions about me. No husband? Told him I had a boyfriend and he just kind of disregarded it. I'd messed up when he called me and told him where I worked to give him the general idea of how long it would take me to meet him. I still didn't really know I had any issues on my hands. He finished his work and we left at the same time. Friendly southern goodbyes and off I go, not realizing it would take almost 2 months to get rid of him. The creepiness started when I went to work the next morning and he was parked in his work truck a block or two up from my house. He waved when I drove past and I smiled and waved back. We do that in the South, it's just what you do. Then he called me. I didn't recognize it as him and thought it might be work. I'm notoriously late, 5 to 10 minutes, so I answered. Okay, weird, but we chat for a few minutes and I go to work. He texted me a couple of times that day. I texted back that I had a boyfriend, thanks anyways, and expected him to go away with that. For the next 6 weeks, he kept showing up places and texting or calling every few days. I didn't answer or respond in any way after day 2. He came up on me in the grocery store one day when I was with my kids. My kids are both assholes in the best possible way, and they weren't having any of this friendly banter. They knew the situation because I had told them it had been going on for a few weeks. I stood back a little bit, giggling while my kids said whatever they wanted to him. You know, awesome early teenage attitude peppered with profanity. He walked away pretty quickly, and my son watched to make sure he actually left the parking lot. When we got home, my brother, think super redneck, came over for dinner, and the kids told him what happened. Now think, superhero redneck brother. So brother asks for my phone and goes outside to give gas man a call. I don't know verbatim what he said, but it came down to don't call or text her again. If you see her in public, walk the other way. This ended his stalky behavior immediately. In fact, he was called the gas man to my work, due to a gas leak in the kitchen about 3 months later. When I saw him, then couldn't get away from me fast enough for his comfort. I'm very grateful to my family for standing up for me when I wasn't being heard. Sometimes it only takes one voice from outside the situation to make something stop. Creepers will usually go away when they know more people than just their target know what is going on. We've got to keep each other's backs when we can. Thanks for listening. Writing this has been really therapeutic for me, actually. It's crazy how much of an effect this had on me even 13 years later. My stalker story starts out like many others. I am a normal girl just trying to live a normal life. There's nothing special about me, but I seem to attract the attention of all the wrong people. Maybe this was all my fault. I'll let you guys be the judge of this. I work the midnight shift at a popular gas station in a low-income, high-crime neighborhood. We are open 24 hours, and I get a lot of the crazy customers. Most of them are drunk or on some kind of drug, but my creepiest customer of all was Ted. Ted was your average, everyday semi-truck driver. On Sundays, he would come in at 1 in the morning, and the rest of the week he would come in at 3. Everybody at my job knew him by name and would always welcome him with a smile, so he seemed like a safe kind of guy. He was very friendly, always looking for somebody to talk to and laugh with. We would talk about life. I told him about my husband and the crazy way we met. He told me about his divorce and how he got an amazing motorcycle out of it. After a while of talking, our conversation became comfortable. He was my best regular after all. I told him about my upcoming vacation, how I had just turned 21 and planned on going bar hopping with my best friend, and he told me that I was dangerous and that he had to watch out for me. Being my sarcastic self and knowing that I am the least dangerous person I know, I responded with, "Oh yeah, I'm so dangerous." After a while, Ted suggested that we hang out. Now remember that he is a 56-year-old single and ready man, and I am a 21-year-old timid and very married girl. We should not be hanging out. I would always tell him that my husband wouldn't like that, but he kept insisting. The thing about me is that I'm terrible at turning people down, so I just told him that I didn't know my work schedule yet or that I would be busy on the day he wanted to. He gave me his number and I threw it directly into the trash when he left. About a week went by and he let me know what week in May he would be on vacation, and he begged me to let him take me to the beach. Continued to tell him I didn't know what my schedule would be for that week. Well, eventually the week in May rolled around and Ted began his vacation. He saw me at work taking out the trash and he cornered me to tell me. Now this part requires some explanation, so stay with me. The way we take out trash at work is we load up all the bags into a Walmart-sized shopping cart and wheel it out to the dumpster. The dumpster is located on the side of the building, where there are conveniently no cameras, and surrounded by 3 walls of bricks and 2 large metal doors to keep the homeless people out. Opening one metal door always allows enough space for the shopping cart in my body to fit, so that's usually what I do. Easy in and easy out. I was inside the dumpster area loading all the trash bags in, and I saw a vehicle pull up to me. It is 3 in the morning at this point, so it is dark and the headlights are blinding. There is an exit right by the dumpster, so a car passing me isn't unusual. But the vehicle stopped, taking away any room I had to get out and blocking me in. Then somebody stepped out of the vehicle and approached me. He was just a shadow figure with the lights behind him, but once he spoke, I knew it was Ted. He told me he was finally on vacation and we could have our beach day at last. I didn't speak as I was frightened, knowing that I was concerned and I had nowhere to run if I needed to. He then said something that sent chills down my spine. "When we are done at the beach, I'll take you back to my hotel room." I froze, having never given him any reason to think that was alright. He noticed the obvious terror on my face and tried to backtrack. You know, where we will watch movies and eat popcorn. I am an adult. I have been to a few hotel rooms myself, and I know what 2 grown adults usually do in them. I didn't know what to say, so I just stayed silent. Eventually, he got the hint and left. The next day, Ted came in to see me at work, and this time he wasn't playing around. He walked straight to a display of peanuts that we had at the front of the store and grabbed a bag. "Gotta have your daily bag of nuts," he said, looking directly at me as he put them on the counter. "I have a bag of nuts just for you." Then he winked at me. My typical welcoming smile had faded and I was done acting nice around him. I told him I hate nuts and he looked at me like I wasn't getting the joke. "Oh, I got it, and I meant what I said. I hate nuts." He walked away and grabbed the rest of his items and came up to pay. As he was about to leave, he turned around. "I forgot something. Let me go get it so I'll be ready for you." He walked right down the aisle I was afraid he was going to, and came back with a box of condoms. I could feel his stare as I rang them up, but I couldn't look at him. I would have puked if I had. In the days following, I hid from him. Having already memorized his daily schedule, I would always go to stock the cooler whenever he was about to come in. He figured this out and would open the doors to talk to me. One day I went to the bathroom and he had the nerve to bang on the door and ask why I was hiding. He even asked my coworkers where I was on the nights I wasn't at work. It got to the point where I would break into a full sprint whenever I saw his truck pull up, and I know he saw me. I wanted him to see that I wanted nothing to do with him. For a while, it seemed to finally make sense to him. He almost stopped coming in, and when he did, we didn't speak. But the creepiest of all wasn't while I was at work. I was lying in my bed about to go to sleep, and I saw my phone light up next to me. The light of my screen blinded me at first. I black out my room to help me sleep during the day. But once my eyes adjusted, I saw his face. Ted was staring at me through the Facebook notification, which let me know I had one new friend request. I have no idea how he found me. I never wore my name tag at work, and even if I did, he didn't have my last name on it. He had to do some serious searching to find me. I immediately blocked him, but unfortunately my address and phone number were public on my profile and more than likely seen by him. I know I shouldn't have made my info public. It has since been changed. I put in my 2 weeks right away. I had to come back to work since then, though. A girl's gotta make money and it's hard out here. During my time away, my husband and I came into the store to get some drinks and I saw Ted's truck pull up. Before anybody asked me, yes, my husband knew everything Ted had done. I threw my arms around my husband and he kissed me. It was a passionate, over-the-top, the Notebook kind of kiss, and Ted saw all of it. He looked at me with all the rage in the world. We quickly left after that, but a few minutes later I got a text from my coworker who was there at the time. She said that he was loudly mumbling to himself about how he couldn't believe I would kiss all over some guy in public, but I wouldn't sleep with him. Nothing has happened since. But he could come in at any minute, and I always get a little worried at around 1 or 3 in the morning. I know this isn't the craziest of stories, and I'm very thankful for that, but I needed to share it somewhere. Thank you everyone for listening. When my friends and I were in junior high, we were bored and got the bright idea to go ding-dong ditching, where you ring the doorbell and run off to hide in the bushes and watch people's reactions. Our neighborhood was separated from another subdivision by a field, so we walked through the field to begin our quest. It was in December, but there wasn't any snow and it wasn't too cold. It was also dark outside, but only around 8 or 9 o'clock. So, we get to our first house. There's a car there and some lights on, so we know somebody is home. My friends and I walk to the front door and ring the bell, dashing back to stand behind the tall shrubs and see what happened. For a moment, nothing did. Then we saw that the door slowly open and saw an old woman hobble out. "Hello? Who's there?" She called. "Hello?" She called again, sounding scared. My friends and I were horrified. We didn't expect this, and guilt was pouring over me at how scared the lonely old lady sounded. So, after a split second of indecision, I yanked my friends from behind the shrubs and called, "Oh, sorry. We thought nobody was home. We were doing Christmas carols." One of my buddies was wearing a stupid Santa hat, so he kind of fit the bill. My friends looked at me like I was crazy, but went along with it. The old lady was super excited to have some visitors, and we sang about 5 of her favorite Christmas songs. We were completely off key, kept messing up the lyrics, and obviously sucked, but she urged us to do more of her favorites. We even started to get into it and added little dance moves, cracking up at how ridiculous this all was. She ended up inviting us in and gave us cookies and hot chocolate, letting us play with her little dog. We walked back to our neighborhood feeling like idiot failures. My dumb friend got the bright idea to ding-dong ditch his own house since he knew his dad was home. He rang the bell, running back behind the shrubs with us. His dad ran out with frazzled hair and wearing tighty-whities holding a shotgun. He chased after us and we ran, terrified. He went and got his truck so he could patrol the neighborhood, having no idea it was his own dumbass son he was hunting. And we ended up freezing as we hid in a big clump of bushes for about an hour. Needless to say, we never ding-dong ditched anyone again. This happened when I was in kindergarten. It's been 40 years, so some details are a little bit fuzzy, but some of it is clear as a bell. I used to live on a fairly busy road. I was bused to school. I was one of the last people to get off the bus. I would get off and the bus driver would proceed further up the street to finish its run, and then it would come back past my house. At some point, the bus driver started to require that I wait by the big tree in front of my house to wave at him when he came back past my house. I distinctly remember leaning up against the tree to wait, and I seem to recall I was told not to tell my parents. I leaned against the tree so they couldn't see me. I was 5. I didn't find this weird. An adult told me to do it, so I did. I would wait usually 5 or 10 minutes and wave at the driver when he came back past, then I would go up the driveway and into the house. I remember the driver would give me bubble gum with the black cat on the wrapper the next day when I got on. It had a different taste than most gum, and I remember really liking it. I also remember one day, I hadn't been doing this long, my dad came home early from work and found me waiting and asked what I was doing. I said I had to wait for the driver. He said to get in the house now. I started freaking out, crying because I was terrified that the bus driver was going to be furious and I'd be in big trouble. I was dragged into the house kicking and screaming when the bus came past. I remember waving frantically at the driver from the front stoop as my father dragged me into the house. I don't remember what exactly happened after that, but I now know I no longer wait for that driver. I'm pretty sure that was also the end of the gum with the black cat. I got on the bus as I did every day to go to work. That morning I was smiling because I had just read something funny before the bus had arrived yet. I was thinking about it. Beware of consuming Terry Pratchett books in public. As I looked for an empty street, I accidentally broke the cardinal rule of British public transportation and met the eye of a fellow passenger. He was an older, sweet-looking, grandfatherly Asian man, probably in his mid-50s. He brightened up and smiled at me, and I realized, oh shit, now he thinks I'm smiling at him. Oh well. And nodded to him as I made my way to a seat a few rows behind him. Just a random polite and consequential exchange, right? The next day, he was on the bus again when I caught it, and patted the empty spot next to him when I got on. I shook my head and went to another empty seat, and after the bus was moving, he got up and, to my horror, came and sat next to me. After a few minutes, he leant in and whispered, "You smile so beautifully, like an angel. You should be with the angels." And then he patted my knee kindly. Every day he was on the bus. I tried varying times as much as I could, considering I was going to work, but he was always there somehow. I would just stand by the front even if there were seats. Then the first note was pushed through my letterbox. "You were watching television with your mother. You're a good daughter. I am right like an angel." I found footprints in the flower bed under the living room window. From then on, we drew the curtains. The notes kept coming over a period of about 3 months and gradually got worse. An angel should fly to heaven. You are too good for us. I will make wings for you, and you will smile down on me forever. I went to the police, and they told me that yes, it all sounded pretty bad, but there was nothing they could do because he hadn't done anything physically violent to me. When he attacks you, they said call us. A week later, I opened the door to go to work, and there was a dead white dove on its back with its wings open on my front doorstep. And another note, I will give you friends for heaven first, and an angel will need messengers. I looked down at the poor dead bird and realized that this wasn't going to stop and nobody would help me. I took the next day off work, somehow found a new place to move into the next day, and hired a moving truck. I think fear powered me that whole night. I drew the curtains, and despite my mother's protests, she was in end-stage cancer and I cared for her. She lived with me as a result. Somehow I packed the entire house up, including my mom and her cat. I didn't sleep and honestly don't entirely remember that night, but by 9 a.m. when the truck rolled up, everything was ready to get carried out. I had the truck drive us almost 100 miles out of the city and then take a scenic route back to the other side of town. We were in our new place that night. That night, I sat on the stairs and watched the letterbox. Fell asleep there, and when I woke up in the morning, I cried. There was no note on the mat. I caught the bus into work, and to the horror of all the other passengers, I ugly cried. He wasn't there. I never saw him again, but I was on edge till I eventually moved out of the country a few years later. I haven't got on a bus since. I'd like to add, I'm nothing like an angel, and if anybody is wondering when this happened to me, it was back in the 90s. This happened when I was 7 years old. My sister and I had invited our neighbor, who was around our age, over to come for a movie night. To give you some idea of my old neighborhood, this is important to the story. The neighborhood is pretty old, so the houses aren't far apart or super close together like most neighbors are these days. It's also very hilly with tons of trees. Her house was beside my driveway, less than a 2-minute walk to her front door. Anyway, after about 2 hours of pizza, Scooby-Doo, and girl talk, it was about 11 o'clock, so we decided to walk her home. As we started walking toward her house, we noticed a black truck parked at the end of her yard up by the road. Nothing odd since people park like that all the time. Right as we all stepped off my driveway and into her yard, a huge hooded figure stepped out from behind one of the far trees in her yard. We froze, not sure if we were seeing things or if it was a real person. About a half a minute, we started backing up, trying not to lose eye contact with the figure. That's when he started walking slowly, getting faster with every step. By the time we hit my driveway, he was stepping onto hers. We booked it, sprinting for the door. He also started running at this point, all of us screaming. Ran into my garage and locked the wooden door behind us. Our screams were so loud that my mother and grandma heard us and met us at the door. At this point, all three of us were freaking the heck out, trying to explain to my mom and my grandma what happened. We told them that a man had chased us. My mom called my friend's house to see if they saw anything outside. My friend's grandma said they didn't see a truck or a man. My mom ended up walking with us this time since we were all too scared to walk alone. My friend's grandma told us that what we saw was the pizza man. Even in my 7-year-old mind, I knew that was a lie. What pizza man hides behind a tree? Also, the only other car was the truck, which didn't have a pizza place logo anywhere. About 2 years later, we found out who the hooded man was. It ended up being my friend's 45-year-old uncle, who was a known meth addict. Apparently, he was super out of it that night. According to her grandma, he just wanted to play a prank on us. To the cracked out uncle, who was also a pizza guy that wanted to pull a prank on a group of children, please stay away. I was in college. My roommate was a born-again Christian, and she invited me to her Bible study in church all the time. Eventually, I went and I kept going. Wasn't a fan of the pastor, but there were a lot of nice young adults who liked to have clean, sober fun, and I didn't drink or party, so I felt like I fit in. But I didn't agree with everything they believed in, just the more normal stuff like God and helping the poor, not some other things. This one guy in the Bible study, Drew, was pretty quiet, good looking. He seemed like he knew everything about the Bible, which amazed me. I thought I know nothing about all of this. He is so wise. I was 21 and he was 27. He wasn't a college student. He just worked, which I later learned maybe he didn't. We were going to go on a young adult retreat, and because I worked, I couldn't leave early on Friday to drive up to the mountains with the girls in the group. Mutual friends said that I could ride with Drew, so I said okay. On the way up, he was pretty quiet for the first hour, not very friendly at all, and it was a long trip. But as we got closer to the mountains, he really warmed up. He got pizza and he paid, which was nice. Then he stopped the car just so we could look at the stars. He even played some Brian McKnight. It was turning into a date, but I didn't know it or see it that way then. I was starting to really like him and feel like we had a connection. He was about to drop me off at the girl's cabin when he suddenly gets very serious and tells me that something happened between him and another girl in our church group. But she is telling lies about him, and I am not to believe whatsoever I hear. He doesn't explain what actually happened and doesn't say who it is. I enter the cabin and all the girls are there, and very quickly one girl, Bree, who is probably the youngest, 19, tells us, "Ladies, there is a wolf in sheep's clothing among us at this retreat." Now, if you don't know church folk, they get very dramatic and talk like this all the time, so I just thought, okay, here's some drama. She tells us this story about how she was talking to some guy here, but he started stalking her, wouldn't take no for an answer, and even threatened her sister. Now, my spidey sense is up, and I realize that this must be what Drew was telling me about. The church group doesn't know who she is because she won't say, because she doesn't want to gossip and says, leadership will handle it. Well, Drew eventually leaves that weekend retreat early. There goes my ride back, I thought. I don't know if he was asked to leave or what. That week, he asked me to hang out, and we do. I still like him and don't know who to believe. On our hangout, we don't really do anything. He takes me to the mall and reads the Bible to me. Okay, cool. Then he parks his car on some suburban lookout, top of the world type of thing, and just looks out. And says he is a view guy who really likes views. I am not one to be impressed by suburban lights, so I'm just like, okay, well, this is boring. I give him another chance. I invite him to come see a play with me. When he comes, he immediately meets one of my friends, Brian. Brian introduced us to his boyfriend, Nick. I am in theater. I have many gay friends. Well, for the majority of the rest of the date, Drew lectures me about how gays are going to hell, and I must not really love them if I don't stop to tell them that. I eventually cry because it is this ugly argument in his car we have been having for hours in the parking lot of Panera. I say I want to go home. This is basically the worst date ever, and I don't agree with what he says. He tells me I need to give up my dream of being an actress because what if the Lord doesn't want me to do that? Theater is something I did my whole life, not to mention my major, and his reasons for me giving it up had nothing to do with the impracticality of it, but because of God. This guy was nuts. I get home and I offered to make us some cocoa to just kind of end things as friends, or at least on a better note. I know I'll see him at church, and we have mutual friends and are in the same Bible study. Things got weird. He tried to get sexual with me, but then also blamed me for tempting him. With my tear-stained, exhausted face. I end up crying again, and I just wanted him to go home. But I was so emotionally exhausted, I didn't know what to make of this. He calls and texts me that week, and I don't respond. Then it's a Sunday night. I'm talking to my friend Tim, who no longer goes to this church anymore. I tell him I went on a crazy date with Drew. Before I can tell him how it went, Tim says, "What? That guy's crazy. You need to abort that mission now." He tells me he is close with Bree and her family, and Drew is a stalker and threatened Bree's sister. I don't know what to believe because it sounds like Tim believes this just based on Bree's story. I hang up and I call my mom to try and tell her what happened, what Tim told me about Drew and how it was such weird timing, considering what happened with me. While I am on the phone with my mom, I get a knock at the door. It's about 10 p.m. on a Sunday night. I look out, but nobody's there. I go to get my roommate and ask her if she can just sit with me in the front room because I am freaked out and think someone is there. There is another knock at the door. I open it and it's Drew, and he looks all in a frenzy. I asked him what he was doing here, and he just said he needed to talk to me, and I wasn't answering my phone, which was because I was genuinely busy earlier in the day. The conversation is getting long, and my roommate is still sitting there, so I tell her she can go back to her room, it's okay. I let him come in because I am conditioned to be overly nice. This was a huge mistake. We start talking, and as soon as my roommate is gone, he pulls out a knife and starts saying how he was worried my neighbors did something to me because I wasn't answering his texts and he didn't know what kind of situation he would be walking into. I have zero fighting skills and no experience in this situation at all, so I calmly say as casually as possible, "Hey, can you put the knife away? It makes me feel weird." He asked me if I want the knife and I said no, I just want to pretend it isn't here. Somehow talk him down and get him to leave. I think I convinced him he still had a shot with me somehow. The next morning my mind is clearer and I feel like I need to tell my mom what happened. She has me tell my dad, who has me tell the church youth leader and security at my apartment. I also tell a cop the whole story, and he says that this guy is definitely a stalker, and I will see him again unless the police call him. I say it's fine. I think everything will be okay. No need to call. I just didn't want more drama. I had never talked to a policeman about anything before. I was still processing and didn't understand that this was serious. My mistake. The next night I went to a party. Another church-related one, but Drew is not supposed to be here. He told me before that he wasn't going. Well, he is there. I decide to leave, but my 21-year-old self doesn't think to ask to have someone walk me out. I figure if I leave and he is still there, problem solved. I didn't anticipate him realizing I left and following me. I am walking to my car in a dark apartment parking lot, and I hear him call out my name. He is following me. I start running and I say I don't want to talk. He's now chasing me. I'm clicking my car to open, thinking, this is how a girl dies because she did not let the cop call the stalker because she's dumb. Thankfully, my car unlocks. I get in and I drive away. The problem is this guy knows where I live. I move out a few weeks later and I block him on all social media and phones. Drew eventually somehow managed to make another Facebook profile and sent me a message that summer saying he was praying for me and had forgiven me for trashing him to people, even though I still never told anyone what happened, except for the useless pastor who did nothing. That was the last I saw or heard of him. Unfortunately, this predator continued to serve at that church in the junior high ministry, of all places, around many young girls. No one on church leadership listened to me or Bree, who both complained that this guy was stalking us. I never reached out to Bree to let her know what happened to me, and I never got to hear her story in detail, but I told the young adult pastor about the knife and him trying to get sexual with me and how I was scared. Thankfully, I don't go to that church anymore. This was all the pre-Me Too movement. What sucks is I've had a few experiences with crazy religious dudes. This was the first, but not the last. I'm still trying to come to terms with why that is. This literally just happened this morning. I was driving my daughter to school and we had to take some country lanes to get there. There's our particular part that gets very narrow. Only one car can go down at a time, but it opens up after a few yards into a small village. I was driving through this part with 4 other vehicles behind me, one being a huge truck and this older lady in her late 60s or early 70s, I'd say, comes speeding up in front of me. We both stop and she begins shouting at me to reverse, to which I point behind me to the other vehicles to show that I couldn't go back. She continued to scream and flip me off for another minute. She then opened her car door and began getting out, so I hit the auto lock button to lock all my doors. She stood in front of my car and totally lost her cool. She was screaming and throwing her arms around, screaming for me to reverse, which I again tried to tell her I couldn't, pointing to the other vehicles behind me. She moved to get back into her car, then changed her mind and stormed around to my door, where she started to forcefully tug on the door handle and banging like crazy on my window. She had lost it. She was shouting, holding her fists up at me and telling me that I can't drive and to get out. Also shouting other stuff that I couldn't hear because I began loudly warning for her to not touch my car and to back off because she was scaring my kid. I could see others getting out of their vehicles behind me looking concerned. I told her I had a number plate and her actions on my dash cam. It was a lie because I don't have a dash cam, but it worked. She backed off and got into her car. She began reversing quickly but stopped and charged forwards towards my car at full speed. It's obvious to say I crapped myself because I thought she was going to ram me head on. I should add that she had a child in her car with her, as did I. She slammed on her brakes, then reversed again to the entrance of the lane a few meters down. I quickly drove past but could see she was still screaming and flipping me off, so I sped off because I didn't want to frighten my daughter any more than she already was. I hate to think what this woman would have done to me if I hadn't locked my doors. I hope to never meet this crazy bitch again. To me, she looked a lot like the woman in the film The Visit. My mother is strong, independent, and hardworking. She worked her ass off as a sergeant in the army until she was honorably discharged after she was assaulted by a fellow sergeant. They wanted to keep it hush-hush, which in my opinion was messed up. She went on to work in a maximum security prison in Georgia. This is where she met my father, who was a corrections officer. When they first met, they bonded over basketball. My mom was somewhat a star when she was in high school, but a lot of college scouts overlooked her because of her height and color. He was able to go to college for it. until he hurt his knee and had to drop out and search for a different career. She says everything was great. They were the IT couple, a beautiful couple. She still says he was one of the most handsome men she ever saw. She compares him to the singer Maxwell. He was smart, fit, charming, and funny. Life was perfect until he moved in with her a year into the relationship. Then everything went downhill. She says some days she would come home from work to find him in a drunken stupor, lines of coke spread out on her own coffee table. They would argue, she would toss out his bottles of Jack, and he would smack her across the face, beat her throughout the night, and she would have no choice but to go into work the next day, sore with bruises on her face and black eyes. Her neighbors and coworkers knew what was going on but turned a blind eye. But the warden even threatened to fire her. It wasn't good for the inmates to see her like that. She decided she would kick him out, cut all ties, and get an order of protection against him until she found out that she was pregnant. She put off breaking up with him for a while, working double so as to not come home, basically living at the prison. She only felt safe there, ironically. One day she went home and he was there, sober for once. She told him about the pregnancy. By then, she was about 2 months along. He went off saying he wasn't ready for a child. He demanded she get an abortion. He gave her money for it the next day before he went to work. Instead of an abortion, she spent the money he gave her at the mall. When she got home, he asked if she got it done and she said no, explaining that she was 32 and she wasn't getting any younger and that she always wanted a child. She was ready to raise one with or without him. She says he glared at her, his eyes full of hatred. If looks could kill, she would have dropped dead right there. He just nodded and said, "Fine, keep it," and stomped off to bed. My mom said she was surprised. She thought he would have gone off on her. She began to feel hopeful. Maybe he would stop abusing her, stay sober, and they could live happily again. She dismissed the glare as just her imagination and followed him to bed. She had work early the next day. Sometime during the night, she woke up to find him leaning over her, holding a huge knife to her throat. The same evil look in his eyes from before. "You don't do what I tell you. I'll cut the effing baby out of you right now," he said. They fought, rolling off the bed and crashing to the floor. Somehow she was able to knock the knife out of his hand and it skittled under the bed. Out of reach, she says he then picked her up by her hair and threw her against the wall and punched her repeatedly in the stomach, chest, and face. She did the only thing she could and kicked him in the crotch as hard as she could. He let out a yelp and dropped to his knees. "Frickin' jerk," he hollered, cupping his balls. My mom says she quickly grabbed her keys and ran out of the bedroom. She said her stomach felt like it was on fire and it hurt so bad she could barely see. Her head ached from hitting it when she fell off the bed. She got to the living room wanting to grab her purse before she left. Tried feeling around for it but couldn't find it. My father must have worked through his pain because my mom says he soon followed her. "You're not leaving," he stated, heading towards the kitchen. My mom said she felt a shiver running through her body. She knew if she didn't leave right then, she would die that night. She knew he was going for another knife, and also knew she wouldn't make it to the front door since the kitchen was right next to it. There was no way she could run to the door before he got to her, not in her condition. She felt like she would pass out at any second. She says as she heard my father rummaging in the kitchen, calling her all types of names, she opened the living room window, pushed out the screen, and climbed out. She hung out from her hands, closed her eyes, began praying, and let herself drop. She fell onto one of those large air conditioning things that you usually see outside, landing on her knees and elbows. Said it hurt like a lot, but she was alive. She drove off, never looking back. My mom says she left her whole life behind. Her pretty condo, her friends and a job. She loved and escaped to New York, where my grandma lived. All because of my father, a man she loved and somebody she thought loved her back. So Dad, although I haven't seen you since I was 15, I hope to never see you again. Honestly, for your sake. I grew up in a very safe, very affluent neighborhood. It was unheard of for anybody to lock their cars or houses, and when somebody new moved to the neighborhood, it was mere moments before they were welcomed with open arms and open doors. Despite being surrounded by what could be described as one large neighborhood family, my mom was very particular about house rules being followed, one of which was never going out alone. Walking to a friend's house, 3 of us have to go, so 2 could walk home together after dropping you off. It was rare, but occasionally just 2 of us would be able to sneak out from under her watchful eye and run to the corner store a few blocks down for some candy or soda. One sweltering day during the summer, I turned 9. I found myself home alone and restless. I decided to take my sister's cool new 10-speed for a spin around the block, a few times. Now, even though I was tall for my age, the bike was still a few inches too big for me. I decided that didn't matter. I jumped on and started pedaling. My first lap around the neighborhood went off without a hitch. Birds were chirping, the sun was shining, and the wind blowing through my curled hair felt wonderful. On the second lap around the block, I passed an older, unfamiliar car parked on the side of the road, and the sun reflecting off the huge scrape down the side temporarily shocked my vision into bright blue stripes, which I furiously tried to blink away. On the third lap, I saw the car pull off the side of the road, heading towards me, and a tiny pit of unease began to grow in my stomach as the driver slowed when he passed me. I chalked it up to being scared of getting caught out alone and continued on my way. I picked up speed as I rounded the corner towards my house and decided to go for one more time around the block, but to make it quick so I'd beat my mom home and avoid the trouble I knew I'd be in if she'd caught me out alone. I hit the bottom of the hill next to our house with some speed and started to climb to the top, slowing more and more the closer I got. By the time I reached the top of the hill, I had to stop and catch my breath, teetering on the too tall bike at my hip. As I struggled to catch my breath, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My arms locked on the handlebars and every inch of my body froze. I had been caught. I just knew it. I heard a car creeping up behind me and it just had to be my mom. But it wasn't. When relief should have washed over me, the unknown dread only deepened, further stiffening my frozen still limbs. I turned to see the same old car with the same blinding scratch down the side, slowing down right next to me. The man stopped the car right next to my bike on the wrong side of the street, and through his opening driver door started to ask me if I had seen a stray dog running about, because his had come off the leash and run off. I froze. This cliche question is the one they warned us about in school, the one every kidnapper supposedly uses. I decided if I answered him firmly and rode my bike away, he would know his plan wouldn't work on me. Plus, he might just be really looking for his dog. This was my plan. My terrified body betrayed that plan, and a trembling no is all I could manage. As I fumbled my feet to the pedals of this too big bike, his car door flew open and he lunged. No, I said again as I wobbled my way past his open door, his hand brushing the back of my shirt and knocking my back tire as I pedaled as fast as I could, the 50 feet to the next driveway I saw. I pedaled, legs burning up the drive, running my front tire so hard into my neighbor's front step that it bent the wheel. My body catapulted over the handlebars and I bursted through my neighbor's front door. Eddie, help. My neighbor was not home. I ran into the kitchen, still calling in the hope I was wrong. Eddie, what are you doing? A man's voice was behind me and I froze, hearing my heartbeat in my ears, feeling the blood pumping through my veins, knowing that this was it. I slowly turned around not knowing what else to do, and there stood my neighbor's son home from college. I dissolved into tears, gargling out what happened. He tossed the bent bike into the back of his truck and drove me around the corner to the safety of my home. My mom was home and had the look of death in her eyes until she saw my tear-streaked face. The police were called. The neighbors were called. The car had been spotted frantically circling the block the few minutes following our encounter, but it was gone by the time the police arrived. To this day, 20 years later, I still have a hard time riding my bike alone. I still get chills when cars slow down next to me, and I still wonder if the next girl was as lucky as me. I'm a 21-year-old senior in college, living with 3 other girls in an old one-story house. We are located about a 15-minute walk from the main campus, and the majority of our neighbors are college students. That being said, this town is notorious for being a little, well, sketchy. Millie is home to one of the first insane asylums built in America. After the majority of it being closed down or abandoned for years, the final building was shut down about a month ago, and the remaining patients were released. Now, I doubt this is directly correlated with my creepy experience, but I am not the only one who has had interesting encounters with strangers since the release in this town. 2 nights ago, after getting off work around 11:30, I came home to my roommates getting ready to go out for a night. I realized how stupid it was, but we often had an open door policy, free for anyone to come over and visit as they please. We would lock the door at night, but the one time we forgot really came to bite us, me in the backside. Around midnight, I was hopping in the shower as my roommates were heading out the door. We said our goodbyes, and I told them I would be meeting up with him later. I had just stepped out of the shower when I heard what sounded like the front door slamming shut. I automatically assumed one of the girls had forgotten something, so I called out their names. No response. I then hear footsteps in the hallway. I call out again. Still nothing. Fear and dread came over me, and I immediately grabbed my clothes and ran into my bedroom. I threw my clothes on, let my ear to the door, and waited in silence to hear if somebody was in the house. I hear nothing at all. I decided that it must have been one of my roommates grabbing something and leaving again, so I head into the living room to get my phone. 6 missed calls, and it's still ringing. My roommate, Carrie, was on the other end. I answered and immediately could hear the panic in her voice. "Lee, are you in the house?" "Me, yes, of course, why?" "Well, you need to get out. Sam drove by and said he saw a man walking through the front door. He called the police, but you need to leave." I shit myself right then. Nothing was going through my head besides pure adrenaline and fear. I wasn't sure of the man's intentions, but I sure wasn't going to wait and find out. While remaining on the phone with my roommate, I bolted out of the front door and hid behind my car. I watched the house from afar, waiting anxiously to see any movement. My thought process was not at its finest at this point, and I realized I probably could have made smarter decisions. As my friends approached in a truck, I sprinted out from behind my car and jumped in the bed of their truck. Just as I did that, a dark figure scurried off into the woods, running in the opposite direction. I can only assume he had been inching closer as I was waiting for them to arrive. I screamed bloody murder and we floated out of there. I refused to go back into the house until the police arrived, and it had been triple checked. There were no signs of anything being touched or stolen, which makes me wonder what the man's intentions were. You can guarantee that I've locked my door every night since, and to the stranger who walked into my house while I was in the shower, let's not meet, please. There was this guy in high school that was really funny and pretty popular, and almost everybody got along with him. He didn't bully anyone, that I can recall, and it was impossible to not laugh when he was around. He was a genuinely goofy guy, the class clown type. He would say hi to me, try to strike up conversation, and even compliment me. Being an awkward teenage girl in an extremely cringe-worthy emo phase, I was flattered. I wasn't used to getting attention like that, so it was nice to have a guy around the school that would randomly say, "You look really cute today." I wasn't interested in him romantically at all, though. He was more of just a funny acquaintance that made me smile every once in a while. He added me on Facebook, like he did with almost all the kids in his grade and the grade below his, my grade. After a while, he asked me if I wanted to hang out with him after school. I contemplated it, but there was a faint voice in the back of my head saying it wasn't a good idea. Nothing really screamed danger or anything, but just something in my gut telling me to be wary. I never took him up on his offers, even if other people would be around. He also asked my best friend to hang out after school, but she never accepted. We would talk about how weird it was that he would ask us separately to hang out with him after school, since we weren't the type of girls he was known to date. And we both agreed that we would just really rather not. Time passed, life went on, and I completely forgot about that guy. Until about a week ago, when one of my friends shared an article about a bar in the next town over that was under scrutiny for supposedly aiding predators who hunted there, or something to that effect. I can't remember exactly what the article said because I was more focused on something else in the article. That guy I went to school with is in prison for raping 2 women, and that bar was his hunting ground. And the word around my hometown is that they weren't his only 2 victims, just the 2 that got justice. I lived in New Mexico for several years before moving to the Midwest. My friends Amy and I, both females, would spend many days exploring the remote corners of New Mexico, discovering abandoned ghost towns and enjoying the quiet, desolate beauty of the desert. One afternoon in March 2010, we were traveling from Ruidoso to Albuquerque. Always up for exploring, we took a back road rather than traveling the more direct highway. One leg of our journey had us on NM 55. It's a remote, teeny-tiny 2-lane highway. We loved those types of roads, up until that day. This part of New Mexico is flat, desolate desert. You can see for miles, and there is virtually nothing except dirt and rock between towns, and towns can be miles apart. So we were on NM 55 going north. After a few minutes, we saw a white pickup truck up ahead of us going down the same direction. Suddenly, he stopped his truck sideways in the middle of the highway, blocking both lanes. We were about a mile away from him, and as we got closer, we began to get uneasy. We could see no reason for him to do this. We were the only other vehicle out there, and we began wondering if we should turn around, rather than come up to him and have to stop. We were about a half-mile away from him when he pulled over to the opposite side of the highway, but his truck was still pointed in the direction we were going. We tried to relax a little. Surely, this guy was a rancher or something. Maybe he was checking something on his land. As we passed him, we noticed a few things. One, there was only one person in the truck, a middle-aged guy who never took his eyes off of us. And two, he was talking into a walkie-talkie. A few seconds after we passed him, he pulled back onto the highway and started following us, but he never got too close. He would get to within a few car lengths and then drop back a little and then speed back up again to within a few car lengths. We were getting nervous, realizing how alone we really were. We had seen no other traffic on that road, and we hadn't told anyone about our great idea to take this detour. We checked all of our cell phones, and neither one had signal, which is typical for remote New Mexico, but absolutely terrifying given our present situation. Amy was driving and speeding up while I was frantically checking the map, hoping to find a road that would have more traffic. There was no other road. We had to travel through this one to get to the next town, Mountain Air. Turning around to go back the other way didn't seem like a good option. After a few minutes, we saw another pickup truck coming towards us. He was going very, very slowly, maybe 20 miles per hour, if that. This pickup was old and beat up, whereas the one behind us was newer. Amy had us up to 75 miles per hour at one point, which wasn't typical for us on these 55 mile per hour highways. And we blew by the old pickup. As we passed it, we saw that it was another middle-aged guy, and he was talking into a walkie-talkie. After the white pickup passed him, he pulled a U-turn and pulled in behind it. As we watched all of this, we could see the white pickup truck guy talking to his walkie-talkie. There was no doubt that these two guys knew each other. We were being deliberately followed, and for the first and only time in my life, I felt hunted. They stayed right behind us. We watched for obstacles in the road, and we truly thought the old beat-up pickup guy had set up a trap in the road and our vehicle would be disabled somehow. We talked about driving into the fields. We were in an SUV, but this was obviously their territory, and we were afraid of what would happen if we went off-road and got cornered, so we stayed on the highway. Now the white pickup truck guy was right on top of us, and we could see him talking into the walkie-talkie, and he stayed right on our bumper. An old beat-up pickup truck guy was right on top of him. The three of us sped down the highway. The white pickup truck edged closer. His maneuvering and edging closer made it apparent that he was trying to bump into us. I watched helplessly as he got to within inches of our back bumper. Amy floored it, and we were passing 80 miles per hour by now, and edging up to 90. The road was flat and deserted, but any little thing going wrong could have been catastrophic. We absolutely were not going to slow down or stop if we could help it. The white pickup pulled into the opposite lane and started to gain speed. The only thing we could think of was that he wanted to pass us and get in front of us. If he got in front of us and his buddy was behind us, then we would be boxed in and trapped. We looked frantically at the rocky desert on both sides. Our only option was to off-road it. Should we risk it? Could we speed through the desert and make it to safety in one piece? As we topped a small incline, we saw a sign that said, Salinas Pueblo Missions National Monument, and it pointed towards a road on the left. And right at that moment, a blue pickup truck pulled out of that road and onto the highway in front of us. As we came up on the blue pickup, we saw the plate said U.S. Park Surface. We looked at each other and then looked behind us. Both pickup trucks did U-turns and went the other way. We followed the blue pickup to Mountain Air and then made our way to Albuquerque. I don't know exactly what those guys' intentions were, but they obviously weren't good. There is something seriously wrong out there. I notified the state police, and they said they would keep an eye on stuff. This area is very near Bella, New Mexico, which is where Tara Calico was abducted. It's also about 100 miles from Elephant Butte, New Mexico, which is where David Parker Ray had his little secret torture laboratory. We didn't put all of that together until later. Even though David Parker Ray had died by the time this happened to us, we do believe that there are others out there like him, and whoever abducted Tara has never been caught. Or maybe we came into methamphetamine lab territory. But since this happened on an actual highway rather than a backcountry road, I tend to discount the meth lab theory. Whatever is going on out there, it's not good. This just happened a few hours ago. My house is on the very edge of town, right before a large wooded area. We do have neighbors, There are 6 apartments in total and some houses across the street, but it was around 11 p.m. and at that time, most of them are usually asleep or sitting in the front of their TV, or both. I went out to take my dog on a walk and noticed a bike leaning against my wall in the driveway. It seemed odd, since there's a bike rack behind the house, but I didn't really think much of it and went on. When I came back, the bike was still there. Now, there are about walls on both sides of the driveway, about 5 feet tall at the highest point right behind the gate, so I looked up the wall to my left, right into the cold dead stare of a woman crouching on the wall. Scared as hell, I just kind of stared back for a minute. I had never seen this woman before, and she didn't move whatsoever. My dog also seemed rather confused and scared even. I kept walking to the door but never took my eyes off of her. Once we were past her, she jumped off the wall and started following us. At that point, my dog, pretty big Doberman mix, began barking and growling, and that luckily stopped her from coming any closer. I got in the house, locked the door behind me, and am once again glad that I had this dog with me. I don't know who she was or what she was up to, but the scariest part is that she probably already stood there when I went out. So, creepy lady in my driveway, I hope you have left, and please don't ever come back. This happened to me back in 2007. I was 9 years old, and my brother was 14. My mom had sent us out of the house with about $30 to go to a movie and maybe get a bite to eat afterwards. After watching the movie, it was getting pretty dark and I was ready to go home. But my brother wanted to get something to eat first and we agreed to walk our way to McDonald's, which was only a couple of blocks from the movie theater. On our way there, we were stopped and approached by a man. He had a friendly smile plastered on his face and he was holding his child's hand. There didn't seem to be anything off about him. He was average looking and seemed to be nothing more than a father having a great day out with his son. "Hey, do you two think you could give my son and I a hand real quick?" he asked. "We need help loading a mattress onto the bed of our truck. The truck is just up the road." "Sorry, but we don't really have time," my brother said. It was at this time that I noticed the little boy. He was about 8 years old and he looked abnormally thin. He had a blank expression on his face and wore clothes that were much too big for him. I turned my attention back to the man, who was now mumbling to my brother about how it would only take a second. My brother kindly declined again. Being the helpful kid that I was, I joined in with the man and tried to persuade my brother that we should help them out. I turned to my brother, who was now staring down at the little boy. My brother had a disturbed expression on his face as he looked down at the child. The kid stared back at my brother blankly. I didn't understand why my brother had that look on his face. He grabbed my hand and said, "I think that's my mom over there." He pulled me and we began walking away from the man. I didn't understand what was going on and why my brother had just lied about her mom being there. He didn't let go of my hand and practically dragged me until we were a far distance away from the man and his son. I looked back and could still see the man holding his son's hand. Only now he wasn't smiling. He had a look of fury, and he yanked the little boy by the arm and they walked away. I pulled away from my brother's grasp and bombarded him with questions. He shushed me and pulled his cell phone out of his pocket. He dialed in a number and began pacing around nervously while talking on the phone. I remember the police showing up and my mom came soon after. She took me home, but my brother was left with the police. I asked my mom what was going on and she said that the police were just questioning my brother because the man we had encountered was dangerous. That's all I was told and I went to bed. By the next morning, I had almost completely forgotten about the incident and things went back to normal. It wasn't until a few days ago that these memories flooded back into my mind. I decided to call my now 22-year-old brother to get some answers. When I brought the ordeal back up to him, he finally gave me the information I wanted to know. And now that I know everything, I understand how freaking terrifying our encounter with the man truly was. My brother told me that while the man was constantly trying to convince us to come with him, he happened to look at the little boy. The little boy then looked at my brother with his eyes filled with terror and mouthed the words, "I'm not his son, please help me." Then his expression went back to being completely blank, almost as if he had never said anything at all. This was why he had become so freaked out and snatched me away. When he called the police, they hurried down and he described the man the best he could. They couldn't do much with the little information my brother had given because we hadn't even seen the car that the man supposedly had. My brother told me that a few weeks into the investigation, they had found the little boy who was with the man dead. His body had been cruelly dumped in the woods. The cause of death was malnutrition and dehydration. If my brother and I had gone with the sicko, we likely would have met the same fate. He obviously couldn't have kidnapped both of us on his own, as my brother was a fairly strong fellow. That meant he probably had other partners who would help him snatch up unsuspecting kids. Unfortunately, they were never able to catch any of the weirdos who did this to the child. But the man was definitely not his father. His real parents had already been searching for their missing son for almost a month. The creeps had managed to kidnap the poor kid and used him as their puppet to try and kidnap other children. Every time I think about the boy, I feel deep pity for him. He was only a year younger than I was at the time, and I can only imagine how terrible it must be to slowly starve to death. And to the disgusting bastard who starves and murders children, you better hope we never meet. So I've sat here all day reading scary stories on Reddit, and some of them brought up memories of an extremely scary time I had a couple of years ago. I was driving back to my college from my family's house after Thanksgiving break. I was traveling through a rural area in the Midwest, and I suddenly had the urge to pee really bad. I was reading all the road signs I came across to see if there was a nearby town that I could stop at to find a gas station or something to use the bathroom. Unfortunately, the nearest town was about 30 miles away, and I had to go so bad. It was unbearable. I finally made the decision to get off the next exit that I found, even though they don't lead to any towns. Shortly after I pulled off on the next exit, I came across a gravel road. I thought this was perfect because I didn't want to get in trouble for exposing myself in front of anyone. It was a pretty private road. So, just so you are all aware, I am a female. It is very difficult for females to pee on the side of the road, as you might imagine. I thought the best course of action would be to take my empty McDonald's cup and pee into that. I did just that inside of my car, just in case anybody drove down the lonely road. I had finished my business and dumped the cup. I did not litter, only dump the contents into the grass on the side of the road. I was starting my car and getting ready to turn my car back around the way I came when I saw a bright red car speeding off down the road I was on. It startled me, but they drove right on past. I thought to myself, it must be the locals out messing around. I started to drive off and I saw a dingy, rusted red pickup truck coming from down the road after the car. They too drove past me. As they passed, though, I saw two male passengers who were staring right at me. This freaked me out, but I told myself all the more reason to get a move on. I still kept my eye on the pickup truck, though, and I saw them turning around, coming straight at me. This freaked me out so much, I decided the best course of action would be to drive in their direction, continuing on the gravel road as opposed to turning around, giving them an opportunity to chase after me. I drove right by them again and saw that they were grinning at me. I was so scared I hit the gas, which, on a gravel road, doesn't do much good. I finally got a grip on the road and headed along the gravel road. I looked in my rearview mirror and they were following me again. I was freaked out. My hands were shaking. My foot was flooring the accelerator and I reached for my phone. Now, I'm not the person to call 911 in just any situation. In fact, I was scared to call the police because I was afraid I was just being paranoid, but as I looked in my rearview mirror again and saw them gaining on me, I called the police. When I called them, the operator picked up and I explained to her what was going on. During this call, the men in the pickup truck were so close that I couldn't see their front tires. I was sliding all around the gravel road trying to stay on the phone with the operator. She was giving me directions to the nearest town several miles away. They followed me the entire way there, all the way until I reached the police station. I saw them turn around very quickly because they knew I was out of their reach. I definitely learned my lesson from this, and I think from now on I'll stick to peeing in public restrooms. I have so many stories of creepy dudes who followed me. I swear, it's like I have a sign on my forehead that says stalk me. The first guy I met while I was volunteering in the office at a nursing home so I could get my volunteer hours for my Catholic confirmation was him. This was back in 2003, so I was 13. Let me preface this by saying I'm a tiny female, always have been. At that time, I was around 4'11" and I weighed about 110 pounds. So one day I was at the nursing home, working in the office, organizing mail, faxing papers, copying, the normal stuff. My volunteer coordinator asked me to go drop off the mail to the residents in their rooms, so I do. I start off on the second floor and work my way up from here. It was fairly uneventful until I got to the 5th floor. Here is where it starts to get weird. I go to drop off the mail to the one man by the name of Rob. He was a paraplegic, kind of like Stephen Hawking, but he could move his head and speak normally. He couldn't do anything else on his own besides that and move his right hand to move his electric wheelchair around. I knock on the door and he tells me to come in, So I do, and I place his mail on the closest table. I then go to turn around and leave, and he's right in front of me. I stop and kind of freeze. I really don't like talking to strangers, and the vibes I get just from being in the room creeped me out. I try to politely ask him to move, but he refuses. Instead, he tells me that he needs me to help him get into bed. I look at the bed and notice a whole wall full of posters of half-naked women. I definitely wasn't comfortable in that room after that. I tell him that I'm just a volunteer and I'm not allowed to touch the clients, but I'll definitely get a nurse to get him into bed. He refuses and is adamant that I have to help. At this point, I am thoroughly creeped out, and I hated that he was leering at me, so I politely nope the heck out of there. I fast walk to the stairwell and run down the stairs, not even bothering to worry about dropping the rest of the mail off. I get to the office, and I'm telling my volunteer coordinator what happened, and who do I see? Rob is coming around the corner. Now at this point, it's time for me to go home, so I have her sign my time card, and I run to the nearest bus stop. Just as the bus was pulling up, Rob came trucking along in his wheelchair. I jump on the bus, pay my fare, and watch as he stops and stares at me as we drive past. About a week later, I go back, and this time my coordinator asks me to help with the activities. No problem. I like talking to most of the clients there, and the nurse that was in charge was also. It was my favorite thing to do, and I was seriously considering becoming an activity coordinator for the nursing home once I got old enough to do it. I was planning on staying in my position well after I got my needed hours. I really enjoyed it. Well, halfway through bingo, Rob comes rolling up. I see him and politely smile. You know the smile. Tight-lipped, doesn't reach your eyes, and very standoffish. That kind. He doesn't seem to get the hint and instead parks right next to me. He talks my ear off the entire time, staring at my lack of chest. Eventually, it's time for me to leave, so I get up, grab my book bag, and walk out. It's fairly dark at this point. Night comes early in the late fall and early winter in the northern US. Rob follows me out, but thankfully the bus is there, so I just hop on and make my way home. He ends up doing the same thing for the rest of the time I volunteered there. When I mentioned it to my mother, she laughed it off and said that he was harmless. I fully believe that if he weren't a paraplegic, he would have been a serial rapist or killer. A year later, after I left the nursing home, I'm visiting my mother at work. She worked in a parking garage her brother owned, located a couple of blocks away from the nursing home. We go out to eat at a local Cuban chicken restaurant. All seems normal. Look out the window, and who do I see? Rob, sitting in front of the window staring at me. My mom laughs and tells me to go say hi, and I refuse, and she keeps pressing it. I still refuse. My dad notices how uncomfortable he's making me, so he tells my mom to drop it and don't force me to talk to some man I clearly don't like. I seriously jumped out of my chair and hugged my dad. Rob was still sitting there staring at me, so my dad got up and went to go talk to him. I still don't know what he said, but Rob hightailed it out of there and never tried to talk to me again. I saw him a few more times, but he always turned around and stayed away. He's definitely dead now, and that brings me the greatest relief.